So what is going on? So I decided once again to review more armor from the Assassin's Creed series to see, kind of analyze and kind of see what I like and don't like, along with finding out kind of how historically accurate the armor for Ezio Auditore was during the Renaissance period. Kind of setting how functional it was for both combat and climbing. As long as with just is it correct for that time period? So look at this picture I have here. Right, this is obviously a full armor kit that he was given when it was about when Brotherhood took place, which I believe was in the very early 1500s, which was about, I want to say, the mid to the endish of the Renaissance period. So with the Renaissance period itself, a lot of things became much less about, not too much less, but much less about just pure functionality and tactical purposes, and more into decorative and aesthetic purposes, which is a lot of what you see here, but along with it serving a lot of nice functionality purposes as well. So with what he has here, right, he's got the nice white robe with like the nice silk and the red accent. Okay, and then you've got the beautiful, nice plated armor with what I believe looks like a hardened leather underneath. Okay, and this it's pretty okay, right? It looks like it's gonna protect you from getting possibly cut or even thrusted into. Looks like he's got a lot of armor going on there, protecting his shoulders, his forearms, his whole chest area. Right, so it seems pretty good, but something that I'm noticing about it specifically that I find interesting is just how much aesthetic there also is in the armor, along with serving a very functional purpose as well, which is that by looking at the armor you can kind of see just, well, the first detail is that there's a lot of carving in the metal to make it look very decorative, make it look very nice. Along with his robes overall, they're very much, they are very Italian heritage with how people used to dress back then. Of course, a lot of people, their robes wouldn't go all the way down to half your shin, and they wouldn't really wear giant hoods like that. Per se, people would typically more often wear their hoods. If they did wear hoods, they were a lot tighter, and you'd see a lot of people wearing hats and things such as that. But there are things like that, and along with that, it's mostly white. I feel like people would add a little more color into their uniform. Maybe you'd put some blue or some green in there as well, just to really flare it up. But overall, it looks pretty good. Again, something that I prefer his outfit be made out of is Gamberson, right? Or at least also getting Brigadine on there as well, because Brigadine, it's great stuff. It's essentially what studded leather armor is based off of, and studded leather armor is very terrible for a multitude of reasons. But again, looking at his outfit here, if he had, instead of it just being this thin fabric robe that anyone can just cut through with pretty much any type of sword, or axe, or pike even, it would be much better if he wore a Brigadine or a Gamerson to give him just that extra amount of protection. Again, and wear it right below his waist. I would take those robes off if it was for a pure functional purpose. I think it actually would look really, really good without them. Because in this specific case, it does look kind of as though he's wearing a dress almost. And the reason why I would take that off, even though yes, the Renaissance was more about aesthetics, as far as being able to be functional when climbing and doing parkour, it's not very safe, and there are lots of things you can do to mess up, where a rope can catch and slip on your foot, and being that grip on shoes back then wasn't really meant for scaling walls or doing crazy things like parkour like what we do nowadays. Having a really, really long robe wasn't very predominant unless you planned on going to a great hall meeting or some sort of court ball, or if you're attending a special court with a lord or a king, then you would wear much fancier clothing like this. As far as just how much of it that there is. But I think overall this outfit, it's pretty functional. I like it. There's a lot more protection going on. I like that he has nice big pauldrons protecting his shoulders and along with parts of his arms and his armpit areas. So the only way we can actually possibly kill him in this case is to control either his sword or his hand, lift it up, and then stab right where his armpit is, and just keep going for the thrust to eventually get through his neck or parts of his jaw and head and break that and kill him. Or even his head. Again, like in my last video that I made for this, I suggested that Altair either get a helmet that is kind of in the shape of the robe, and then where the bottom half is, that goes just above his collarbone or about his collarbone area to make it a hardened leather. But in this case, I would suggest maybe even, because he already has heavier armor on, maybe even going for some chainmail, because it's not quite as heavy as some plated armor. It is heavier than some, or others, but not all in this case. But again, maybe doing like a chainmail either over or under the hood would be nice. But overall, I think with the period that it takes place in and the way his armor is set up, it looks like overall it does seem rather functional and possibly even somewhat accurate for its purpose. Now, I'm not really sure what some of these belts are that he's wearing. I assume it's to hold the leather armor in place, or sorry, the steel in place, but then again, there were other ways to do that, and that was typically by holding it together from the inside, so that way people couldn't just cut at your ropes or cut at the armor piece and then you have your armor fall off, and then your enemy opponent can just kill you through that. Something else I'm not really quite sure what's going on is that it's a double-breasted piece of armor, so chest plate. So it was much more common to see a full chest rig that went from about to your neck area to either just below your belly button area or to about just above your crotch, even depending on the armor that you wore for that time period. So seeing a breastplate and then another breastplate piece was actually rather rare, and I don't believe that people did it as often because it just gave you a huge disadvantage in combat if someone is using something like a rapier or a longsword and is able to get past your defense and then sees this little tiny centerpiece above the assassin symbol and can just stab in, and then it's game over for you. Okay, so this is the only image I could find of this armor, but this is, I think, also a little more prevalent for him. But then again, there's a lot of things that I dislike about this in regard to historical accuracy and functionality. So something that I do like is the fact, again, that he's wearing a metal pauldron that is in multiple metal layers, so that gives him more of that capability and agility to climb buildings and stuff. Also, I like that he has a very Renaissance aesthetic collar area where it's unfolded. There are parts of it that are meant to be shown off to look better. With that would include essentially just the robe itself without the armor on it. But again, something that I don't like is how many things are loose on this outfit. Because from a combat perspective, you want things to be tight enough so that way your weapon or your clothing does not interfere with your weapon or your weapons as you're fighting or your environment. But then again, also, it was also really nice to be able to kind of have things a little somewhat loose. You can have more agility to make more maneuvers while fighting. And something I feel like actually is rather kind of accurate is the shirt that he's wearing with the van braces. I feel like that I've in some historical paintings that I've seen, I have indeed seen people wear things like that, where they will wear just a nice fitted shirt. Sometimes they were really tight, other times they were a little looser. I believe more in a combat setting it was looser, or sorry, more tight, but I think in a lot of civilian cases if they want to wear vambraces. That way, if they ever get in a street fight or a street duel with another civilian, they won't risk getting their arm cut off. But again, that would be made out of a very hardened, plated leather, not a soft leather. Soft leather does not do anything against heavy blows or thrust. It will just go right through it. So I think what he has going on with his right arm is great. He's got the, I believe, a hardened leather so he can get some agileness in there with his hand, but along with the plated armor on the side of the vambrace, so that way if he gets hit in the arm, it'll hurt, but it won't actually kill him. Hopefully it won't break his bones either. On the left side though, I don't like that one very much because it looks like it's studded armor, again, which would better be brigandine, which is where you take a metal armor and then you give it the specific holes where you can punch little studs in. You put a fabric fitted perfectly onto it with the color of your choice if you were rich enough, and then you kind of pattern that stud into it, and it kind of gives it that leather armory look, but it actually adds even more color to it. So that would have been better. Again, with the chest plate as well, I don't like that it's double-breasted because that creates a huge disadvantage and basically can almost even make the chest plate that he's wearing completely pointless. Again, for if he's in combat and his guard gets messed up, or he, let's say, gets punched in the face slightly and it stuns him or something, and his guard is down, and then he can see that, oh, right in the center of his chest there's a really weak point. I'm going to strike, or I'm going to thrust, or I'm just going to do something in that general spot right there where I can clearly see the weakness and kill him. Along with the fact that it looks like the straps that I see on his chest, I don't like that they are on the outside. It would make more sense if they were a lot thinner, and then on the inside, a lot thinner and a lot thinner in a sense, but also a lot wider, and then put on the inside of his chest armor, so that way, if that spot does get hit, cut, or hit with blunt force, it's not going to break the strap, and then his leather armor won't fall off. As far as a cape itself, those actually were rather prevalent. People wore those a lot. I think the half cape is a little odd, but I guess if you're using it for a purpose for fighting, I guess it might make sense. But again, it would actually see even more purpose to wear an actual cloak and not just a half cape, because that can actually get very much so in the way even more if you had a full cape where, a full cloak where it could wrap around your whole body and not as much of it will be on one side as you're fighting. So there's that. And again, something else that I don't like is the fact that their stashes flail out. It's very unpractical for both fighting and climbing agilities. But again, those are things I would change about this outfit. I think overall it looks okay, but again, there are a lot of things that still change about it to make it look more functional and historically accurate to the Renaissance period, where things were, yes, aesthetic, but also still needed to serve a functional purpose, as things back then did happen, where you required to be inside of sword fights somewhat prevalently in case something went wrong. So there's that. Okay, now viewing his armor, when he wears the Altair armor, which looks more just like his armor, there are things, again, that I do like about this, but also a lot of things I don't like about it. Again, something very similar to the other things I reviewed in this video. That being that, one, I would want his cape to actually be a full-length cape. Now, I understand that for aesthetics, it might be half cape so you can actually see the backside, but again, if you're in combat, if you get a full cape, ideally that should take off some of the area of risking getting the entire thing and the entire cape's weight and momentum on one side, possibly getting caught or doing something like that. But then again, it might even actually be better that he makes his cape actually even longer, so he can actually use that half cape to actually wrap it around an opponent's sword. Again, essentially dulling it so if they try to hit with it, it's not going to hurt nearly as badly, along with being able to grip it and pull it down and then strike your enemy as you pull down, or sometimes, or even immediately after. And that is actually a tactic that I think was used back when cloaks were really prevalent during the medieval period, which I thought was really neat. Again, something I do like is I think actually looks rather accurate, or what's going on with his arms and what he's wearing there. I personally don't know the terminology for what it's called. I haven't looked too much into that per se. But overall, I do like that. Again, I do wish that his left vambrace was also metal, because that'd be much more realistic. People did wear vambraces, though they didn't wear them all the time. Again, but vambraces were mostly worn by archers. So again, it doesn't quite make sense that he's wearing a full vambrace, but then again, if you're in close combat and you are worried that you are going to possibly lose your arm to an opponent, wearing a vambrace does make sense. And again, I would really shorten that robe unless you're going to a meeting with the court, or you're going to see a lord or a duke or a king. Wearing very, very long robes was not practical at all. But then again, there's also the case that it did take place during the Renaissance period where things started more functional. But again, if you're someone that's combat oriented and you're wearing that outfit and you need to be ready for combat, you would not wear that outfit with weapons on it. If anything, I feel like the weapons in the vambraces should all be taken off of this outfit, including the sword. Maybe you can keep the hidden blade, I guess, but overall, everything else should be taken off this outfit because of how its overall design is very aesthetic and meant to be looked at to please a person's eye and to impress, which is something you would wear during ceremonies, parties, gatherings, things like that. It was not... You would want to restrict the amount of clothing that got in the way when you're in combat. So wearing this with the intention of getting in combat later makes utterly no sense whatsoever. It would make sense if you took off the armor and you took off the weapons. Then it would serve as a much more ideal and more historically accurate outfit to that period. Again, but typically you'd wear robes like that if you were actually rather rich, because you had the money to afford the fabrics to get them then detailed and tailored and colored, which back then cost quite a bit of money, so you had to be pretty rich. But knowing Ezio and how much money he was able to collect, I'm sure that doing something like that wasn't a problem. But anyway, so that is essentially my review for his outfits here, and I thought it was pretty neat kind of reviewing them and kind of going over what's interesting about them, what's right, what's kind of wrong from my experience and what I've learned through other YouTubers, and also just kind of looking at not just pictures but also reading journals from that time period as well. And I just kind of understanding the whole just how everything worked back in the day when everything was purely for functional purposes because of how time worked back then. Now things gotten more aesthetics as people got more luxuries and war changed over time where people didn't need to dress as heavily in armored, just in armor. So again, I thought that was really neat. Hope you enjoyed the video. Again, I'm just really into making this, and hopefully you stayed the whole way through. That's awesome because it's fun in there. I really enjoy it. So again, thank you so much. It's probably gonna be the last one I'm gonna make for right now. I typically don't make videos too often. I typically do them when I have a good idea in mind, or at least what I perceive this to be a good idea. So again, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.